Have you ever looked out a window and seen something that made your stomach drop? Not because it was scary, but because it simply couldn't be there? That moment when your brain tries to rationalize what your eyes are showing you, but no matter how hard you try, the pieces just won't fit together? My wife Sarah and I experienced this 3 months ago at the Convergence Hotel downtown, and I still can't sleep through the night without checking our bedroom window. If you've ever felt like reality has thin spots where something else bleeds through, hit that like button and subscribe, because what I'm about to tell you will change how you look at every hotel window for the rest of your life. We booked the Convergence Hotel for our anniversary because it was cheap and we were broke that year. The building was one of those old Art Deco places from the 1920s, with brass fixtures gone green and carpets that smelled like decades of cigarette smoke. Our room was on the 7th floor, number 717, and the first thing Sarah did when we walked in was go straight to the window. I was messing with the ancient radiator when I heard her go quiet in that specific way that means something is wrong. She was standing perfectly still at the window with both hands pressed against the glass, her breath fogging it up in small circles. She said my name once, in a voice that made me cross the room in 3 steps. The window looked out at a street, which makes sense for a downtown hotel, but we were on the 7th floor facing east toward the river, and the street we were looking at wasn't 4th Street or any street that should have been visible from that angle. It was narrow, barely wide enough for a single car. The buildings on either side were old brownstones with elaborate stonework, faces carved into the lintels above the doors, gargoyles crouching on the corners. The street itself was cobblestone, actual cobblestone, and it curved away to the left in a gentle arc that disappeared into a fog that had no business being there on a clear October afternoon. I pulled out my phone and opened the map app. According to the map, our window should have been looking at a parking structure, then 4th Street, then the river beyond. There was no narrow cobblestone street, no brownstones, no fog. Sarah said maybe the map was wrong, which is what you say when you're trying to make reality behave. I went to the other window in the room, the one that faced south, and that view was exactly what it should have been. But when I went back to the east window, the impossible street was still there, patient and quiet and absolutely real. Around sunset, I noticed something that made my chest tight. The light was wrong on that street. The sun was setting behind us to the west, but the street outside the east window was lit by morning light, soft and pale and slanting from the wrong direction entirely. The shadows on the cobblestones were stretching toward us, which meant that street had its own sun, or it existed in a different time. Sarah saw it too and squeezed my arm hard enough to hurt. That's when we saw the first person. He came walking around that gentle curve, moving slowly, almost deliberately. He was wearing a long coat and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. He walked with his hands in his pockets and his head down, never looking up, not at the buildings, not at our window even, though I had the feeling he knew we were watching. He walked the length of the visible street and then turned down an alley between 2 brownstones, and he was gone. If you're watching this and you've experienced something similar, drop a comment below saying, "I've seen something that shouldn't be there." You don't have to explain, just let me know I'm not alone in this. Night fell in our room and in the real city outside, but that street stayed locked in its perpetual mourning, the light never changing, the fog never lifting. We turned off all the lights and sat in the darkness watching, and that's when we started to see more of them. People walking that same route, appearing from the fog, walking the length of the street, disappearing into the same alley or into doorways that weren't there before. They all wore old-fashioned clothes, all kept their heads down, all moved with that same deliberate pace. Sarah counted 17 people in 2 hours, and not a single one looked up. We tried taking pictures, but they didn't come out right. The window just showed the reflection of our room. Whatever we were seeing didn't want to be recorded. Around midnight, Sarah fell asleep on the chair, and I kept watching. That's when I noticed the street was closer. Not by much, maybe a few feet, but definitely closer. The brownstones were larger now, more detailed. I could see the individual stones in the facade, the tarnish on the brass door handles, the names carved on small plaques beside the entrances, names like Aldrich, Marsh, Wetley, names that sounded wrong. The distance between us and that impossible place was shrinking. I woke Sarah up and showed her. She wanted to leave right then, but something kept me rooted there, some need to understand what was happening. I told her we should stay until morning, see if that street would still be there in daylight. We pushed the other chair to the window and sat together, holding hands, watching that street get closer, inch by inch as the night stretched on. The people kept coming, more frequently now, sometimes 2 or 3 at a time. But now I started to notice something else. Every once in a while, one of them would pause and tilt their head slightly, as if listening. And then they would continue walking, but they would take one step to the side, a little closer to where their street met our window. It was coordinated, all of them doing it, moving their whole street incrementally in our direction. They wanted to reach us. By 3 in the morning, the street was close enough that I could see the texture of the cobblestones, could make out the iron boot scrapers beside the doors, could read the water stains on the stone. The people had become more distinct, too. I could see the buttons on their coats, the buckles on their shoes. And I could almost see their faces now. They were still keeping their heads down, but the angles were better. Part of me desperately wanted to see their faces, and part of me knew I should never look at them directly. If you're still watching, hit that subscribe button right now, because what happened next is something I need people to believe. Sarah noticed it first, her hand tightening on mine. One of the people on that street, a woman in a long dress, had stopped walking. She had stopped right in the middle of the cobblestones, maybe 15 feet from our window, and she was standing completely still with her head down. We watched her, and then slowly she began to raise her head. The angle changed degree by degree, and I could see her chin now, her lips, the curve of her nose. Sarah was whispering, "No, no," under her breath, and I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Her eyes were wrong. When she finally looked straight at our window, her eyes were the color of fog, and they were looking at us, but also through us. She smiled, a small, polite smile, and she raised one hand and pointed directly at our window. Where she pointed, a small circle of frost began to form, spreading outward in delicate crystalline patterns, even though it was 60 degrees in our room. Other people on the street started to stop walking, one by one, until there were 8 of them standing still, all raising their heads, all looking at us with those fog-colored eyes, all smiling that small, polite smile. The frost on our window was spreading now, covering the entire pane, and through it I could see that the street was close enough that if the glass wasn't there, we could have reached out and touched the nearest brownstone. I could hear sounds now through the closed window, the clip-clop of footsteps on cobblestone, the rustle of old fabric, voices speaking in a language that wasn't quite English but almost. And underneath it all, a low thrumming sound like breathing, the breath of something huge and old. Sarah pulled me away from the window, physically dragged me across the room, and we grabbed our bags and ran for the door. The hallway outside was normal, but when the elevator arrived and the doors opened, I looked back down the hallway toward our room. The door was still closed, but underneath it I could see light, that same pale morning light, and shadows moving across it, as if the people from that street were now inside our room, exploring, learning the dimensions of this new place they had reached. We didn't stop at the front desk. We just ran through the lobby and out into the real downtown streets. We walked for hours, too wired to sleep, too scared to check into another hotel. When the sun came up, we went to a diner and drank coffee until our hands stopped shaking. We couldn't go back to that hotel, couldn't risk that street getting close enough to actually touch us. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night. When I looked up the Convergence Hotel last week, I found something interesting. Room 717 has been booked solid for the last 3 months, one-night stays only, different guests every time, and according to the reviews, people keep reporting the same thing. Strange views from the window, streets that don't match the maps, people in old-fashioned clothes, frost on the glass, and every single review mentions that the street is getting closer. Last week, the first review appeared from someone who said they touched the window while the frost was forming and felt the glass give slightly, like it was softening, becoming permeable. They pulled their hand back just in time, but they felt something on the other side press back, something with fingers that were too long and too cold. That review has since been deleted, but I screenshot it before it disappeared. The hotel is still operating, still renting room 717, still collecting money from people who don't know what they're walking into. If you've made it this far, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel because I'm going to keep investigating this, keep collecting stories from other people who have seen these impossible places. And I need you to be careful. The next time you check into a hotel, take a good long look at the view from your window. Make sure the street outside is the street that should be there. Make sure the light is coming from the right direction. And if you see frost forming on the glass, even though it's warm in your room, if you see people stopping to look up at you with fog-colored eyes, get out. Don't ask questions, don't try to take pictures, don't touch the window. Just get out. Because that street is still out there somewhere, looking for new windows to appear in, new people to watch, new barriers to cross. And every time someone looks at it, it gets a little more real, a little more solid, a little closer to breaking through completely. So take this as your warning. Pay attention to the windows. Notice when the light is wrong. And if you ever find yourself in room 717 of the Convergence Hotel downtown, do yourself a favor and keep the curtains closed.